This is our fourth. We have a very special guest today, which is Congressman John Yarmuth. I'm Dave Wilson. I'm with Legacy Home and Estate Services. It's a business my partner Steve Couch and I founded. What we do is basically we take care of people. We sell their contents, then we help them with their upgrades, and then we help them sell their house. So that is our business. I'm also on the board of the Prospect Area Chamber of Commerce. We had our awards banquet last night. Congratulations to a lot of people in here who were recognized in that dinner for us. All right, first we want to go ahead and thank our sponsors. Prospect Area Chamber of Commerce is one of the smaller chambers in Louisville, but at the same time, it's not the size that matters. So we're very happy to have Cathy Jacobs, who is the leader of our PAC, being able to put this on. So we had our big awards dinner last night, as we mentioned. We're still taking memberships. We're looking for dancers for our Dancing with the Stars event. That's coming up in February. So if you're interested in doing some dancing and raising money for a good cause, there are a lot of good charities in this group that they'd be happy to have you dance for. We would also like to thank Lake Forest Retirement Village here. Again, this place, believe it or not, with food, everything included, you can get a small place for around $3,000 a month, and that includes your food, everything. So everything's included. It's easier to tell people what's not included. And the third group we want to thank for bringing us live today is NerdBrand, and I'm going to bring them up real quick because they're sponsoring today's event. Talk to my shirt.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Now, everything you express about your brand to the world is an ad. The most important ad that you have to tell the world about you is your website. At NerdBrand, we're here to help you reach your audience in the most authentic way possible by leveraging the power that the web offers you. To do that, you have to make sure that your branding is on target, that it's actually reaching the people that you need to talk to. And that's where we concentrate.
Yeah, today's, in the buzz and everything that's out there in social media and SEO and all these things that you hear about, it's hard to try to figure out what do I need to focus on, where do I need to go. Branding is becoming a rising king where it's, we've been told for a long time that content, you need to create content, and you still do. Quality content still matters. But the branding, as he said, and the message of that, as you put that content out, it's going to draw a specific audience to you that may want to interact with you or engage with you. So we do everything that a typical agency would do with web, with social, with those things. We're happy to discuss that with you. Our main cornerstones, though, are developing your brand identity and helping you define how you want to appear to people. And we also are, having years in doing web, developing a website that actually we can take and measure that audience that comes in to determine who is actually visiting that website. So we do that through analytics and visual data. So it's there's a lot that's going on that website because that is your marketing hub. That's where everything starts to take place to determine your decisions that you want to make to continue to grow your business, to grow your brand, and reach those people. So, hopefully.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, nerds. One thing I actually do want to talk about them real quick is one thing that was really cool that they did is we were struggling with the language and the coding in our, and Jason sat down with me and went through our website so we could understand what was wrong with our code, why we couldn't figure out where to put pictures. He sat there and spent hours with me just sitting there going through and going, okay, this image needs to go here. We were basically doing a huge Easter egg hunt, but he spent hours just sitting there with me going, no, this is how this works, so I could go ahead and do it in the future. So kudos to him, and thank you very much for your help. And thank you for being here today and bringing us live. All right, so we've already mentioned our guest, and we're going to go ahead and talk about today's agenda. Okay, so why we formed this group, one of the things that we wanted to talk about real quick was we started Spark the Ville at a coffee zone in Westport Village. It was just a couple of people that were sitting there and these businesses were getting started up. There's 3 million networking groups, but there's so few groups that actually are sitting there trying to support each other's business. You don't know who to go to, you don't know who to get support from, and so we got a whole bunch of us together to meet on Fridays, not to talk about what we do for our business and who's the best referral source for us, but how we can actually help each other be better. It's a selfless act to be able to help other people, help other businesses with expecting nothing in return. And it really became a special group that we're now starting to see the benefit of what we were doing for each other. So Richard Sullivan, he's a former pitcher for the Braves. And he just yesterday had a big announcement where Topps, one of the #1 baseball card companies, took his art. Now this is a Louisville artist, and just turned his set into a site called Momentum Rising. You can now buy that. If you see this, Aaron Judge, we were going back and forth on whether or not to have the pinstripes, because pinstripes are a pain in the ass and time consuming. But I was like, man, we may want to have the pinstripes. And now as you see, Aaron Judge signed his card, and that is now available on Topps.com. So that's a big deal. Next is Kim Jones. She's a local organizer here in Louisville, and she just wrote a book. And she's having a big event to have her book launch, and you can now buy her book on Amazon.com. Dave Stadler is my brother-in-law and was also one of the people in our group. He was more of the seasoned veteran of our group, but Dave turned around and was able to turn what he had as Name Drive into El Toro, which is one of the largest now companies in Louisville. And they're in election season right now, so we won't see him for a while. And then Steve Couch, who's my partner, he helped me co-found this. I fixed your picture. He had actually sent me a silly picture earlier, and I threatened to use it, but I decided to change his picture out. But Steve also is the co-founder of our company, and we are selling right now 6 homes. We're working on 7 different estates, and we're helping families throughout Louisville. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm not a fan of Simon Sinek, and we're going to talk about one of the things that we look at as a business is starting asking ourselves questions about why we're doing what we're doing, okay? Why do we love what we're doing? And so a lot of people will tell you what they do. So they'll tell you, hey, we're a real estate company, or we connect with clients, or we can show your magic, or any type of BS story that they can tell you. They do that because that's what they think that people want to know what they do. But not enough people are explaining the why. People believe in something. They want to know why you're doing what you're doing. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to answer for ourselves is why are we doing a real estate company that also sells it'd be much easier to just sell the house, but trying to liquidate the contents and help the person and help them move and get them in a very difficult time in their lives, transition from one facet of it to another is difficult, but we do it because we love helping people. And we do it because we believe that we're going to help this person, and that person will tell somebody else that we can help them. All of us are going to die. All of us are going to have to downsize. All of us are going to have some moment in our life that we're going to have to do a change. And the thing is that we can't sit there and talk about our profitability or our customer service or, those are the things that don't get people inspired to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Those are objectives. So, and the other reason that I wanted to talk about was, the other reason that we all kind of formed and got together was we love our work friends. The reason that people, I was talking with Steph the other day. She's kind of in a transitional place in her life. And she was saying, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to stay here. I don't know if I want to do this and that. And then we started asking, why are you staying with the people that you're staying? Why are you staying at the company? She's like, I love the people I work with. I love the kids. I love this. That's why people are staying at the company. We understand why people want to work where they're working, but why they stay is because the people they're around. And so if you're around people that you care about and people that you're going to battle with, your work friends are sometimes your best friends. And then the next story I really want, one of the other things was I asked, because, I'm looking at, why people are doing what they're doing. I asked a friend of mine who's a Louisville Metro police officer, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you going to run into a situation where a guy's got a gun pointing at you and you're like, okay, I'm going to be that guy. This guy actually had a pretty lucrative career working in the IT industry, and he became a cop, and I said, why'd you do it? And he said, well, the reason why is I'm supposed to say protect and serve, right? I was like, yeah, that would probably be the answer that most people would give. He goes, that's not the reason at all. He goes, I love playing football. I love being part of a team. He says, I love just being part of something. And he's like, I just love feeling that feeling when I would rush in and be able to save the day and help somebody. And I said, but you don't get scared? He goes, I get excited. And it was funny that he used that term excited instead of scared, or nervous instead of scared. He said he was excited. And those are very similar feelings. And so I was wondering, what's that inspiration to go in there? He's like, I also know the guys around me would do the same thing. They do it for me. And they know that they have each other's back. So it's that type of understanding of why you're going into these type of situations? Why are you staying in these businesses? Why are you doing what you do? It was kind of a fun journey for me to look at the last few days as we were preparing for this conversation today. And the other thing is that now is in the environment that we're with, there's really no off button. So whatever you're doing, it's a 24/7 job. Your phones are constant. You can't go home at night and shut it off. You know, I look at my daughter now and I see her, and she's now impacted by seeing things on, you know, her computer and her laptop. It's just constant. Now all of a sudden kids are texting her, and I'm like, oh no. In that world, there is no off button. You know what I mean? It's like when you go home at night on the weekends, your boss can get in touch with you real easy with the social media, with the, you know, text, easy ways for people to get each other's attention. It stresses people out. So if you're going to be stressed out, you might as well be stressed out with people that you love. So, and then the last question that I wanted to ask is, when you're looking at your business, what are you innovating? What are you solving with your business? Make sure your business is solving something and you're not coming up with something stupid. Because some people just come up with ideas and like, oh, this would be a great business idea. Make sure you're solving whatever this problem is. And I'm going to give you some stupid innovations. The Bluetooth toaster was super stupid because the toaster was a great thing, right? And then somebody innovated the button that pushes it up, and I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. That's a great innovation. You're not sticking a fork in an electric thing, and now all of a sudden nobody's dying from that. Bluetooth toaster? Now I got to break out an app to toast it? That's not for me. The second one is the color changing cans. I have the sense of feel. So I really don't need my Coors Light. I don't drink beer anyways. But if I drank beer, I don't need it to turn blue to tell me that it's cold, because I can reach in the fridge and my hand would get cold. The third one, toilet golf. If you want to play golf, that's fine. But if you want to play golf while you're on the toilet, I'm going to see your shoes and I'm going to see the golf pad and I'm going to think you got problems. The fourth one, people disagreed with me. I thought the sleeping bag that you can walk in was kind of dumb. But other people were like, oh man, that's actually kind of cool. So I was like, all right, well, I got to take that one off the list. Yes, talk to me.
I want to tell you exactly how stupid Coors was.
Talk to me.
They paid me $250,000 for that ad campaign.
That was dumb. That was really dumb. And yeah, so I will tell you, Coors will not be a future sponsor of ours. I've probably lost the Bluetooth toaster. Might have got the Snuggie sleeper sofa here, guy here. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're all here to see Congressman John Yarmuth.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. Whoa, that's loud. Thanks for getting up early. I always get up early, but I don't usually have to speak this early, so we'll muddle through together. I got to make a couple comments on Dave's presentation because they hit home. One is that my son, who is a great golfer, just had his birthday on Sunday, and somebody gave him the toilet golf. So what Dave missed, and I don't know if you're a golfer, Dave. When you're looking for a gift for a golfer, you will buy literally anything. And you figure most golfers who have played for a while have virtually everything that you could get in golf. You got plenty of golf balls, you got plenty of golf gloves, caps, all that stuff. You got to find gimmicks like this. My son has literally invented, he went to the craft store and got the equipment, and he made a putter cover that you can, you put it down on the ground, your putter stands up. And for a golfer, you know how valuable this is because it, most people don't hit the greens, so when they get out of their cart or whatever, they're taking their putter and their pitching club with them, laying the putter down, it gets wet, or all of the stuff. So it's a great invention. And he's got a patent on it. He hadn't found anybody to manufacture it for him yet, but he's going to work on that. Anyway, that's a digression. The other thing is the comment about loving the people you work with, and that's why you do what you do. I have a friend, Republican. Yes, I have Republican friends, named Andrew Crenshaw, who left the House several years ago. I ran into him a couple months ago, and I asked him what I ask all the former members, do you miss it? And Andrew said, I don't miss the circus, I miss the clowns. And virtually everybody you ask about having been in Congress, what they miss, they will say, I don't miss the job, I miss my colleagues. And I think those of you who look at what's going on in Washington say, you all can't possibly get along. It's a joke what's going on there. Everybody hates everybody else. It's not the case. One quick example. I've said for years that one of my best friends in Congress was Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy, a Republican from South Carolina, who is always, he led the Benghazi committee. You can remember that. He was always up on TV screaming and yelling at Democrats and everybody else. And nobody could believe that Trey was my friend. And I kept saying, look, Trey's a prosecutor by training. That was his background. He's got his prosecutor demeanor. And we all know we're engaged in political theater, but he actually is a warm, funny, wonderful, honorable guy. Nobody believed me. But last week, when Elijah Cummings died, Elijah being the Democratic chairman of the Oversight Committee, and was the ranking Democrat when Trey was running the Benghazi committee, and they were always at each other in the hearings and so forth. Anyway, when Elijah died, he wrote this beautiful op-ed in the Washington Post talking about how much he loved Elijah Cummings, how much Elijah had meant to him, how much great advice he had gotten from Elijah in private. And so that appeared last Saturday in the Washington Post, and I started getting texts and calls from my friends, and they said, oh, now I understand. So I hope that's reassuring to you that even though you see us yelling and screaming in public, that we actually do get along personally. Otherwise, it would be the worst possible place to work. Because nobody has fun doing the job of being in Congress. But, you know, my background actually is as a small businessman. And as a matter of fact, my family basically are all small business people. My father, many years ago, when he married my mom, he moved to Louisville, because she was from here, and he went to work as a used car salesman for my grandfather, who owned the lot, 8th and Broadway. National Auto Sales, it was called. And I basically grew up at 8th and Broadway. But when my grandfather left, wanted to get out of the car business and go into the banking business, which he did, my father bought the lot from him. My father was then a small businessman running a used car lot. And then he opened an auto parts company, and then he bought another car lot or two, and then he bought an insurance company, and within a few years, he had built the second largest public company in Kentucky. It was second only to Ashland Oil at that time. This is back in the late 60s, early 70s. So that spawned us. I have 3 siblings. My brother Bill was a stockbroker, which is one of the truly most horrible professions you can possibly be. And he left that because he saw an opportunity with a new company in town called Care Tenders that was doing home health care, which was then it was a fledgling business. He became CEO in a relatively short period of time, and now we're going back 30 years now. And just a year or two ago, he merged the company into a company called LHCG, that's Louisiana Healthcare Group, and they are now the second or third largest home healthcare company in the country and do business in virtually every state. When he merged the company, Care Tenders was called Almost Family. They had changed the name, and Almost Family was the 4th or 5th largest home healthcare company in the country. So again, small business to a large business. My brother Bob, who lives in Florida, back in 1979, decided, and I think this is probably true for many of you, decided that he couldn't stand working for somebody else, that he didn't like being told what to do. He wanted to be his own boss. And so he decided to take the easiest way to become your own boss, and that's to become a franchisee. Now, not everybody can do that because it costs money to become a franchisee, but he did, and he went to Florida. He bought the Mr. Gatti's Pizza franchise for Orlando, Florida, Orlando and Gainesville. Built 2 pizza restaurants, operated them for a while, decided that there was a barbecue place in Orlando that he really liked called Sonny's. And he found out that that franchise, and the Orlando area was for sale. So he did that, he bought that. In just a few months, he decided that he realized he was making more money out of the barbecue restaurants than both the pizza places. So he sold the pizza places, started expanding Sonny's, built 4 other restaurants in Orlando, and then a few years later bought the company, the parent company, and has done really, really, really well. My sister, Fran, who was probably the least likely to go into business, has developed this. She opened a store years ago in Holiday Manor, and it was just, it was kitchen stuff and gifts and that kind of thing. And she ran that for a few years. She moved it then out to Lake Forest because she was going to move to Lake Forest, and ran it for a few more years, then closed it, but started buying up property in Lake Forest. Built a building out there in which she housed the shop, started renting out places. So she's this little, very successful entrepreneur, and has reopened a shop because she got bored. And so I don't even know what it's called. What's that? Encore, is that what it's called? Oh, great, thank you. I knew it wasn't the original name, so that's probably why she called it Encore. Very good. So anyway, that's my family situation. And then my son, just 5 years ago, called me up one day and said, Dad, this may come as a surprise to you, but I'm buying Leo, which was a paper I founded in 1990. And I said, really? I had sold it in 2003. It was resold a few years later, and then he bought it from a company in Nashville. And I said, have you done this, and this? Have you asked this? He had already asked all the right questions, done his due diligence. And by the way, my son and I talk literally every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. So this is not like we have a distant relationship. But he wanted to prove he could do it himself. And I was incredibly proud of him. And now, 5 years later, it's still alive. So that's it. So my experience, again, I've been involved in a lot of business ventures. I started a magazine back in the mid-'70s called Louisville Today. And that was an illustration of, I think, why a lot of people do get into business for themselves. They see something, or they conceive of something that they think was a great idea, like the putter cover. I had been in Washington as a staff member for a U.S. Senator named Marlo Cook, Republican senator, and I saw the magazine that they had in Washington called The Washingtonian, which was this very slick city publication, very thick, and I said, well, that could go in Louisville. So I did a fair amount of due diligence, came back from Washington after my boss was defeated in 1974, and decided to start a magazine. I knew nothing about starting a magazine. I knew absolutely nothing. I was a pretty good writer, but other than that, I knew nothing. And we started it, we struggled. There was somewhat of an advantage in not knowing how to do it, in that I kind of started every aspect of the business. I made it I didn't do it because I thought that was the way it should be done. I experimented and analyzed it, and I think that was helpful and helped us survive for about 5.5 years, excuse me, which is pretty good for a publication. Most of them don't make it a year. 90% of publications don't make it 1 year. But I had made one tragic mistake, not tragic, one fatal mistake, and that was I didn't realize where my money was coming, where my revenue was coming from. And I thought that the public would get that we were competing with Louisville Magazine at the time. Louisville Magazine was the Chamber of Commerce magazine. It was strictly a puff piece, promotion for the city. There was no legitimate journalism in it. It was boring as hell. So I said, well, the public will easily get the difference between Louisville Magazine and what we're doing. And we did some really good journalism. We did a lot of fun stuff. You know, we would do stuff like the 10, stuff you wouldn't do today. 10 sexiest people in Louisville, that kind of thing, which was, at the time, proven readership. And we had a lot more readers than Louisville Magazine. But what I didn't understand was that there was only a certain advertising type of advertiser who found it advantageous to be in that kind of a publication. And it was the advertisers who needed 4-color reproduction, and they needed high-quality paper, and that's what they needed. They weren't as concerned with the audience. They just needed to have the right kind of physical format. And a lot of the advertisers in town were members of the chamber. So at that time, most of the big advertisers were department stores. That's not the case now. But they were comfortable in Louisville Magazine. We could never quite pull them away. When I started Leo in 1990, what I was hoping was that Louisville was becoming more and more of an entertainment spot, a lot more live entertainment venues and so forth, and that was kind of the lifeblood of alternative weeklies. That's what we call, in the trade, the Leo type of publication. And nobody was really featuring that kind of access to what's going on in town, basically for a young audience. So we started, and about half of what we did, and still about half of what Leo does, is entertainment related. What are you going to do this weekend? What are you going to do on Wednesday night? Who's playing and what venue and so forth? And that became a staple. What is happening to print journalism and print media of all kinds is the small businesses that supported Leo all this time are basically they're not advertising in print or on TV or on radio. They're using social media. I was at a session, this goes back probably a year, with about 15 entrepreneurs in Louisville, and I went around the room, and they were everybody from somebody who has a food truck, somebody who was baking stuff, hair salon, those kind of very, very small businesses. I asked everyone there how they promoted themselves. And it was always either word of mouth or social media. Not one of the 15 had run an ad anywhere. So I don't know what the future holds for Leo or other businesses that rely on advertising other than Facebook. But I don't think it's very promising, actually. So what Leo is focused on doing now is developing other revenue streams, selling tickets to the events that they advertise, that kind of thing, because the advertising base is declining. And what's interesting is that in this world that is changing as rapidly as it is, business people, particularly small business people, have to be really, really adaptable, because the world may change dramatically and just kind of eliminate their business overnight or their business model. Back in 1976, in the first issue of Louisville Today, we asked Barry Bingham Jr. if he would do an interview for our debut issue. And Barry was always just a wonderful guy. You know, he even saying, okay, you got an upstart competitor here. He's going to compete with me for advertising and so forth. I'm going to help him out. That's the way Barry was. So he does an interview. And in this interview in 1976, he said, what's going to kill newspapers eventually is computers. Because 1/3 of our advertising and 50% of our profit is from classified advertising. And the computer's going to eliminate that. And how amazingly prescient he was before there was ever an internet, that he understood where things were going. So being a small business person has a lot of challenges, and again, I think those challenges are going to be significantly greater as the world changes more rapidly. One thing that I'm going to close with is that people don't think about this, but politicians are all small business people. We are. We're running our own operation. There's a difference in that our payrolls, we don't have to earn money for. Because the government, my payroll, the government's paying my payroll and pays me. But we have our office that we have to manage. We have a campaign operation, which we have to manage. And that business, we actually do have to generate money for, right? We have to go out and fundraise in order to run our campaigns. So we share a lot of the same dynamics as politicians that small business people do. We're entrepreneurs. We don't have anybody who's hiring us except the voters. But beyond that, we operate in many ways the same way that you do. So all that being said, I have great empathy for our small business people. I have great respect for small business people because, again, you know, the world is sustained by risk takers. And all of you have taken risks, as I did, running for office. Some pay off. Not everything I've done has paid off. But I'm proud to be here, proud to be able to meet with you this morning. And I would love to take your questions about this or anything else. Yeah, Dave. I don't know, that was after I sold it. So I don't know, that was not the original logo. The original logo, I'm glad you asked, because it was something I was real proud of, and I still have a lot of shirts and stuff with the original logo on them, was a big L, kind of a graffiti E, and then an O that was a target, and then there was a big splatter over the logo. And that was because Leo stands for the Louisville Eccentric Observer. So we were trying to do something that was very eccentric. And so my guess is that O, the L's pretty much similar to the original L. The O with the dot in it maybe looks like a target, so that was probably derived from that. The new logo of Leo, which I love, was done by in-house people at Leo. And anyway, yeah.
First and foremost, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I almost want to cry, but thank you so much for your service for our country. So
Thank you.
Please just
Thank you very much.
Secondly, so I am a small business owner, and I'm just starting in a totally new adventure. After 28 years in the same thing, I'm doing something new, and I find that it's all a big mindset game. that's never the hard part, the challenges of the day. How have you dealt with the mindset, staying in the game and not paying attention to that?
Well, part of the game in my job is to pay attention to it. The question is, the biggest problem that I face is trying to assess how much the feedback I get represents a significant part of my constituency. So I may get 10 letters about an issue or 10 emails about an issue or phone calls, all on one side and none on the other. So the temptation would be to say, well, my constituents are thinking about that. But I represent 750,000 people. In today's age, it doesn't take much to get 10 people to write a letter about something. So, and generally people who are mad are more likely to communicate than people who are happy. So you have to figure that out. Over time, you learn. So, and this is timely because of the Syria situation. Back when President Obama he actually asked Congress for permission to take military action in Syria. Not many people remember that. We actually had a vote on it. The different communications to my office were about 600 to 3. Okay? Now, even though it's 600 out of 750,000, that kind of ratio is hard to misunderstand. So I could see that my constituents were extremely opposed to going into Syria. Not only that, I talked to other offices and they were getting the same kind of ratio of opposition. So in that situation, it was pretty clear where the public is, but it's not always very clear. And that's the toughest thing I have to deal with. I remember when I was a staffer back in the 70s, and I asked my boss one day, I said, Senator, how do you figure out when to vote your principles, your conscience, and when to vote the way your constituents feel? And he said, I always try to vote the opinion of my constituents if I can figure out what it is, unless it's a situation in which I know more than they do, which is always. And that's the other thing you have to take into consideration. Do these people who are writing or calling really understand the complexity of the issues? And generally, and this is not a knock on anybody, generally they don't, because they have lives. And most of what we're dealing with in Washington is really complicated. You know, the Affordable Care Act, there's nothing more difficult than reforming health care in this country. And I knew that virtually nobody understood what we were trying to do, and that was one of the problems we had in getting public support for it. This is a national issue. But we had to, we knew we had to do something because the healthcare system was just disastrous at that time. I remember back in 2008, premiums in Kentucky went up an average of 38% in 1 year. California, they went up the same amount. There were 800,000 bankruptcies a year because of healthcare costs. You know, the system was just failing so many people. We had to take action. I don't know, we did the right thing, the best thing. I don't think we did the best thing, but we tried. But anyway, you generally understand that you do have a lot more information than the public does. And those are all those factors that have to figure out. Now, you asked me how I put up with all this stuff. I've said from day one, I was 59 years old when I ran the first time. I said every time after that, the worst thing that can happen to me is I play more golf. You know, the worst thing that happened to me is I lose the election and I play more golf and I don't have to travel back and forth every week. So it depends, a lot of it depends on where you are in your life. And when my son bought Leo, not many of you will remember this, but he had already decided he had to make some really tough decisions. a couple of which were the fire people who had been with the paper for a long time, were very popular, had their own followings. And when he did, he took a lot of incoming, more than I've ever taken, to be honest. And I was saying, how are you doing all this? How are you coping with this? And he said, at least they're talking about the paper. That was his attitude. And I have no idea where he got that, because he had never been in a situation in his life where he faced any criticism at all, not even from me. But again, some people are better equipped. People ask me now, how do you put up with all this stuff? I said, bourbon. I am from Kentucky. And I'm the founder and co-chairman of the Congressional Bourbon Caucus, which is one of the more popular caucuses in Washington. And it's totally bipartisan. Totally bipartisan. Rand Paul's a member, by the way. Yeah. All right. Rand and I get along really well. Rand is, although I think in recent months I'm beginning to question where Rand is, because he's doing things in supporting the president that I don't think he ever would have done several years ago with another president. But Rand and I both say what we believe. We are not talking points people. We love to engage in dialogue and so forth. So we've always gotten along and been able to discuss issues. Mitch is totally the opposite. Mitch is totally a talking points person. He's very close. I've known Mitch since 1968. And and we were both Republicans then. Obviously, we've gone in very different directions. But Mitch is not somebody you warm up to. I don't know that anybody really has a warm relationship with Mitch. But we're civil, we get along. We know in certain instances we have to work together for Kentucky, and we do. The other members of the House delegation we're all very close. Matter of fact, Jamie Comer, who represents the 1st Congressional District, which basically starts in as far west in Kentucky as you can go and goes all the way around the southern border, actually to somewhere east of Lexington. He and I commute together. He lives an hour and 45 minutes away, but he finds it easier to commute out of Louisville. So we fly back and forth every week, and we're very good friends. Same with Brett Guthrie. Andy Barr and I get along real well. Thomas Massey, I absolutely love. He's one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. He's crazy as can be. But a lot of times, because Thomas is a pure libertarian, on a lot of issues we vote together and the other 4 vote differently. And Hal Rogers, we've always had a good relationship, so yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I think we all agree we have never seen the far right as it is, and far left as left as it is. I think most of us, I felt turned out a little bit called sentinels. Kind of live in the middle, and a little over here, a little over there, and find our beliefs. But with this much division, this country always hasn't been a two-party system. Do you think the time is right for a stronger third-party option?
No. I don't know. See, I don't know what the middle is. That's the problem. And I've had discussions about this with a lot of people. Most of the time, people in the middle are disengaged. They say they're in the middle because they haven't picked a side. Doesn't mean you have to pick a side, but people haven't thought through what's extreme right, what's extreme left. I would say to you, if you look at where the Republican Party today is, they're nowhere near what conservatism meant 20 years ago. It's a very different party. And it's a party now that to a certain extent, this is true of Democrats as well. We are much more reactive politically than we are proactive. So one side will do something, the other side does the other thing, even if the other thing was something they supported 10 minutes before. I could give you numerous examples. I mean, a great example is what's called cap and trade, which we proposed in 2009 to deal with carbon emissions. And the Republicans, since Obama proposed it, Republicans all reacted and said, no, it's a horrible idea. It was a Republican idea. It was developed back in the late 70s. George Herbert Walker Bush proposed it to take care of acid rain. And Mitch voted for it. Republicans all voted for it. Then when it was Obama's idea, it was not a good idea. They called it cap and tax, that's what they called it. So again, I think both parties to a certain extent have lost their historic moorings. But here's, and this will be extremely partisan, I apologize in advance. Here's the way I describe the difference today. The difference today is Democrats think that government is a way you can actually make people's lives better. Republicans believe government is a way you can make it harder. And whether it's harder to breathe with environmental stuff, harder to eat, they want to cut food stamps, harder to get an education, they want to reduce financial aid, so forth, harder to get housing. All of these positions that they vote for or vote against are things that makes life harder for people, and we try to believe. Now, they don't want to hurt people. I'm not saying that they do, but they don't believe that government is a way to help people. That's the way I would characterize today's Republican Party. I don't think that's conservative or liberal. I think it's just an attitude about government. And we have very different attitudes about government. When I was working in the Senate, so this is 45 years ago, it was very different because you had liberals and conservatives in both parties. So these names won't mean a lot to the younger people in here, maybe to anybody. But on the Republican side, you had conservatives like Barry Goldwater, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, but very liberal people like Jacob Javits, Edward Brooke, Mark Hatfield. So, and then on the Democratic side, you had liberals like Ted Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and Fritz Mondale, and you had conservatives like James Sparkman from Alabama and Russell Long from Louisiana, and so forth. So you were always working across the aisle, because there was always somebody across the aisle who agreed with you. That doesn't exist anymore. But today, what's made it worse is in today's politics, it's more about which jersey you're wearing than it is about what policies you espouse. You're either on it's like UK and U of L. You're in the red jersey or blue jersey, and whatever the other side is doing is bad, and whatever you're doing is perfect. And we're both that way. So I really resist what this whole far right, far left, conservative, liberal, middle, because one last anecdote about this. Years ago, I was at a dinner party. There were 14 of us. And out of the 14, 11, we had this conversation, liberal, conservative. Out of the 14, 11 self-identified as conservative, and 3 of us identified as liberal. So these were all outdoors people. They love to hunt, love to fish. Not me, but the rest of them. And so I asked, I said, do you believe that every child deserves a first-class education? They said, of course we do. Do you believe that any child deserves quality health care when they need it? Of course we do. Do you believe that corporations should be able to exploit the environment just for profit? They said, no, we don't believe that. So why do you call yourselves conservative? And their answer was, they just felt comfortable identifying that way. Now, if you had gone back to the 60s and 70s, it would have been exactly the opposite, because people felt much more comfortable identifying as liberals in that era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, in the 60s, everybody was a liberal, right? So a lot of it has to do with your vision of yourself, is where your politics are going to be today. It's how you perceive yourself. And it doesn't have much to do with policy. Yeah, Dave?
Business question. With the, well, it's going to slip a little bit to politics. My brother's a member of the Yang Gang. He's and you were talking about how businesses are going towards automation, such as the advertisers, et cetera. What are some of the things that you see as ways of offsetting so much automation? I mean, if you're looking at Amazon and some of these larger businesses that are automating everything, what is it going to do to some of these smaller businesses from just being completely monopolized? I mean, even Amazon is now talking about getting into the real estate business. Those are concerns.
Yeah, well, I think, and I've said this for my entire political career, we need to start enforcing the antitrust laws. That's the only thing I know to do. You're not going to stop innovation. You're not going to stop technology. But there's a real danger to the society in letting these companies get so big. We're seeing it right now with Facebook and the great harm that they are doing to our democracy by not controlling what goes on their site. But they're, they've got I don't know how many, 2 billion people on there using Facebook. So, and there's beginning to be a little more conversation about that in Washington. And you're even getting it from some Republicans who are less inclined historically to, at least in modern history, to want more antitrust. But it's eliminating small businesses. What's happened to the book business? There aren't many Carmichaels left in the country. And Carmichael's, I think, survives primarily because it's a pushback against this trend. A niche, yeah. And people want to support Carmichael's because they know that most book businesses disappear, at least street side book business. That's the only thing I know what to do. And what the stock speech I make today, it doesn't really relate to politics. It's about, because we're at this very critical juncture in our country where our past is catching up with us. When I say that, I mean our wild, wild west gun culture, our history of race relations, our infrastructure is deteriorating. So our past is catching up with us, but the future is here. And so you talk about climate, I basically say there are 3 things we absolutely need to prioritize right now if we're going to have a sustainable society 30, 40, 50 years from now. One is deal with climate change, because we're seeing the impact of that every day right now. Anybody who denies climate change hasn't watched the weather. We had a hearing on that in the Budget Committee, which I chair, on climate change and its impact on the budget. And when you hear these experts talk about how much climate change is costing us now and how much more it's going to cost us going forward, it's astonishing. So that's one thing. The second thing is we've got to figure out how to handle artificial intelligence. First of all, we as a country have to do everything we can to be leaders in artificial intelligence, because if we don't, the Chinese will. They probably, as a country, are investing 50 times more than we are in artificial intelligence development. And if they take over, if they dominate artificial intelligence, we're going to be in real serious trouble as a country. Right now, people think this is a little bit futuristic. I mean, you're seeing it right now with self-driving cars, all these things, Siri, all of that's artificial intelligence. But the whole idea of artificial intelligence it's called machine learning. So it's not just that machines can do things, it's that machines can actually learn how to do things. And then, some of the true doomsday prognostications are that eventually humans will work for machines as opposed to the other way around. So we've got to invest in that. We've got to focus on it. I was talking to the head of IBM a few months back, who said that in the next 3 years alone, artificial intelligence will eliminate or significantly change 120 million jobs in the world. That's just in the next 3 years. Every group that comes to my office to lobby me for whatever, I ask about how artificial intelligence is affecting them or how they're preparing for it. I had a group of the Kentucky CPAs in the office, and they were there to lobby about tax policy, naturally. But at the end of the meeting, I asked them that, when you have these professional gatherings and so forth, do you ever talk about artificial intelligence? And all their eyes got really wide. And they said, that's the first thing we talk about. Because they're not going to be any accountants in 10 years, basically. If you know anybody who's studying accounting right now, tell them to get a new life. But anyway, it's going to be incredibly disruptive. Watson now, IBM's Watson, can now do 70% of what lawyers do with much greater reliability. So there are going to be a lot of lawyers out of work fairly soon. Watson can read CAT scans and MRIs more accurately than radiologists can. Again, the disruption, most people focus on that there are 170,000 truck drivers in the country and they're all going to be out of work because of self-driving trucks. But the disruption is going to be much more widespread, and it's actually going to impact virtually every aspect of the segment of the economy, but probably some of the higher professional professions, professional careers than lower level. And the third thing I talk about is early childhood development. We have to make sure that we educate, give the foundation to every child starting at 2.5 or 3 years old, because most other industrialized nations are already doing that, so we're losing a competitive battle. But more importantly, we have, in just a short period of time, we're going to be a majority non-white society, and which means that a lot of our population will be coming from lower resourced, vulnerable population groups. And if that's going to be 2 generations from now, the majority of our tax base, we better damn well make sure they have every possible educational foundation, or there's not going to be a tax base and none of you will be able to retire. So I'm much more focused on where we're going and what we need to do right now, because again, the future's coming at us so fast that we think, when I got to Congress, somebody said, what do you think about self-driving cars? And in other words, should we start talking about national policies and guidelines and so forth? And the response would be, oh, that's 30 years away. And it's here. And we don't have any guidelines for dealing with autonomous vehicles. So that's going to continue to happen. And I think I'll close with this, and it's a long answer to the question, but which I don't even remember the question. But Thomas Friedman, a couple years ago, wrote a book called Thank You for Being Late. And the title has nothing to do with the substance of the book, which is this whole subject, the pace of change and how it's accelerating. And he makes this analysis, which is fascinating. He said there was a period of time in the history of civilization where for 1,000 years, it didn't matter when you were born, your life was exactly the same. Then came the printing press and the beginning of industrialization, and that period shrank to 100 years. So it didn't matter whether you were born in year 10 or year 90, essentially your life was the same. Now he says that's 5 to 7 years. Every 5 to 7 years, something totally disruptive will happen. The smartphone, the iPhone was 2007, Facebook was 2006, I think. All these things have happened basically in the last 10 or 12 years. And that pace is going to continue to accelerate. And so when I talk to students primarily, I say 2 things. One is, realize what an advantage you have over older people, because you're used to dealing with change. When a new game comes out, new PlayStation, whatever number it is, you adapt, you figure it out, go on. Older people can't do that as well. But adaptability is going to be the primary skill, I think, for young people as they move forward, because they're going to have to adapt, they're going to have to reinvent themselves. Maybe they'll all be small business people, but who knows? All right. Thank you.
Very thankful you said yes to coming out today, and thank you, Cathy, for inviting him. It's always nice when we get the yeses. Our next guest next month will be on a different date. We're going to be having the mayor of J-Town coming in to speak with us next month, and then we're taking December off, and we'll take what we've learned from this year and bring a whole new series beginning in January. So thank you all for coming out today. Thank you to the PAC for putting this together. Thank you to John Yarmuth for coming out today, especially this early, and thank you for all for being here. All right, have a good day.